The Veltrans were not just feared, they were legendary across the stars. Every corner of the galaxy knew their name, not for their diplomacy or their technology, but for their unmatched prowess as hunters. From the youngest cub to the eldest leader, the Veltran species were born into a culture where survival and strength ruled above all else. Their hierarchy was simple: only the strongest and the smartest survived, and the weak were forgotten. Their society thrived on a series of challenges, each more daunting than the last, constantly pushing themselves to remain the apex predator across countless worlds. For eons, the Veltrans had claimed dominance over every planet they set foot on. Their warlords boasted of trophies that ranged from the most dangerous beasts of the icy tundras of Xantar to the colossal sea creatures of the water world Yule. The galaxy trembled when Veltran warships appeared in orbit, for it meant that yet another hunt was about to begin, and nothing, not even entire civilizations, could stop their advance. Victory was not just expected, it was assured. In the grand halls of the Veltran's Central War Council, their leaders gathered once again, hungry for a new challenge. For too long, they had conquered the same beasts, hunted the same prey. They needed something new, something worthy of their attention. And so a new hunt was proposed, a hunt that would test even the mightiest among them. Their warlord, a towering figure of muscle and scars, addressed his warriors with a challenge: Earth. This small blue planet, tucked away in a distant arm of the galaxy, had long been considered insignificant. But rumors had spread of Earth's dangerous wildlife, its untamed predators. Whispers of creatures that, while primitive, possessed a fierceness and cunning rarely seen. Lions, tigers, bears, sharks, Earth's so-called apex predators, had intrigued the Veltrans. But most fascinating of all were the stories of an ultimate predator, one that supposedly dominated all others: humanity. The Veltran warlord made his declaration. Earth's apex predators would be hunted, and they would be defeated. The Veltrans would once again prove their superiority. There was no question of success. After all, these creatures were from a backwater planet, inferior in every way to the Veltrans' genetic superiority. The warlord scoffed at the idea that this would be anything more than a formality. Their intelligence division gathered all the information they could on Earth's most dangerous creatures. Through intercepted human transmissions and stolen data, they compiled a list of Earth's top predators: lions, wolves, crocodiles, and the great white sharks that patrolled the oceans. It all seemed simple enough. The Veltrans had faced larger, more dangerous creatures before. Earth would fall just like every other planet had, and they would return home, victorious once again, trophies in hand. With this overconfidence, the Veltran elite hunting squad was dispatched. This was no ordinary team. They were handpicked for their ferocity and skill, each member with 100 successful hunts under their belt. As their warship descended towards Earth, they did not question the outcome. Their only thought was how soon they would return, basking in glory. As they landed, they took in their surroundings. The planet's air was fresh, the terrain varied: mountains, forests, deserts, oceans. It was different from other hunting grounds, but it did not concern them. The hunt would begin, and soon Earth's predators would kneel before them. The Veltrans quickly began their search, tracking what they believed to be Earth's deadliest creatures. They targeted the largest lions first, following their movements across the African savanna. With advanced tracking devices and years of experience, they found the pride with ease. The hunt was swift, almost too easy. The lions were strong, but the Veltrans had faced worse. They moved on to wolves, testing their pack strategies against their own. Again, victory came quickly. The Veltrans relished in their early success, believing this was just the warm-up. But as they continued their hunts, something unexpected began to happen. The Earth itself seemed to resist them. While the animals posed little challenge, the environment began to fight back in ways the Veltrans had not anticipated. A sudden change in weather left them struggling in a storm they could not predict. The terrain, while not as harsh as other planets, was constantly shifting: dense forests one moment, arid deserts the next. The wildlife, while seemingly simple, had an uncanny ability to survive in these conditions, showing an instinct that the Veltrans were not prepared for. These animals had evolved not just to hunt, but to adapt, to thrive in a world that changed rapidly around them. The Veltrans began to realize that Earth was not like the other planets they had conquered. It was unpredictable. The creatures, while individually not as fearsome as those from other worlds, possessed a kind of cunning and survival instinct that made the hunts more complicated. They began to face small setbacks, nothing major, but enough to make them pause and reconsider their approach. Still, their arrogance persisted. These were minor inconveniences, nothing more. They had faced worse environments, more dangerous beasts. Earth would not be the planet to break them. Their focus now shifted to the ultimate prize, the so-called apex predator that ruled this planet. They believed that somewhere, hidden in the shadows of Earth's vast landscapes, there was a creature yet to be discovered, one that could rival even the Veltrans in ferocity and strength. They prepared for what they thought would be their final and greatest hunt on Earth. But they had overlooked one critical detail, one that would cost them dearly. In all their pride and arrogance, they had failed to see the truth. The greatest predator on Earth was not a lion, not a bear, not a shark. The greatest predator on Earth was humanity itself. And humanity was not so easily hunted. The first signs of their miscalculation appeared when they attempted to track a large animal in the dense forests of North America. They had received reports of a grizzly bear, massive and powerful, moving through the woods. The Veltrans, believing this to be their apex target, pursued the creature, but as they closed in, they noticed something strange. The bear wasn't behaving like the other animals they had encountered. It was avoiding them, almost as if it knew they were coming. When they finally caught up, the bear was nowhere to be found. Instead, they were met with a trap, an intricate snare that had been set up using the surrounding environment. One of the Veltrans was caught off guard, injured by the very planet they had dismissed as inferior. It wasn't the bear that had outwitted them, it was something else, something more dangerous. The humans had found them. The Veltrans were used to being the hunters, but for the first time, they realized they were being hunted in return. The humans, who they had considered no more than prey, were actively resisting. And not just resisting, outsmarting them. The traps became more frequent, the ambushes more coordinated. It wasn't a fight of strength anymore. It was a game of intelligence, of survival. The humans, with their knowledge of the land and their ability to adapt, were playing the Veltrans' own game, and they were winning. Despite their technological superiority, the Veltrans were beginning to feel something they hadn't felt in a long time: fear. Fear that they had underestimated the true threat of this planet. Fear that they were not as invincible as they had once believed. Fear that Earth's apex predator was something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. And for the first time in their long history, the Veltrans realized they might not make it out alive. The Veltrans continued their hunt, still confident that Earth's apex predator was simply another beast to capture. They were accustomed to victory, and saw no reason why Earth should be any different from the other planets they had conquered. However, as their mission progressed, subtle signs began to emerge that something was wrong. The animals they were tracking seemed to evade them with unexpected precision. It was as if the environment itself was working against them. But the Veltrans didn't yet grasp the full scope of what was happening. They were still convinced that Earth's true apex predator was an animal lurking in the wilderness, waiting to be found. The turning point came during a routine hunt. One of the Veltran squads, patrolling deep in the forests of North America, encountered what they believed was the beginning of their next victory. They were tracking a large creature, something fast and clever that had been moving just ahead of them for hours. As they closed in, their advanced sensors failed to detect any immediate danger. But then, in an instant, the forest floor beneath one of the hunters gave way, and he was caught in a trap. It was rudimentary by Veltran standards, but it was effective. The creature they had been pursuing wasn't an animal at all, it was a human. This was the first time the Veltrans encountered humans in the wild, and it wasn't at all what they expected. The human had lured them into a trap, using simple yet effective tactics that the Veltrans had never seen before. Confusion rippled through the Veltran ranks. How could a prey species, which they had dismissed as weak and insignificant, possibly turn the tables on them? It was an insult to their pride, but more than that, it was the beginning of a realization that they hadn't yet fully grasped. the humans weren't prey. They were hunters, and the Veltrans were no longer in control. The Veltrans were not used to being outsmarted. They relied on superior technology and brute strength to overpower their targets. Yet here they were, being outmaneuvered by creatures they hadn't even considered a threat. The humans weren't facing them head-on in combat. Instead, they were using their environment, blending into the landscape, and striking from the shadows. The Veltrans found themselves losing members of their hunting parties to traps and ambushes that were ingeniously simple but devastatingly effective. Each encounter left them more confused, more frustrated. The humans used camouflage to blend into the terrain, making it impossible for the Veltrans to track them. They used guerrilla warfare tactics that involved small, mobile units attacking swiftly and disappearing before the Veltrans could retaliate. It was nothing like the hunts the Veltrans were used to. They had always been the apex predators, the ones who struck fear into the hearts of their prey. Now they were the ones being hunted, and the realization was unsettling. Every advantage they thought they had, their strength, their technology, was being rendered useless by human ingenuity. Flashbacks to their previous victories flooded their minds. The ease with which they had crushed larger, more formidable creatures on other worlds seemed like a distant memory. They remembered the thrill of the chase, the satisfaction of dominating every hunt. But none of those memories could help them now. Here on Earth, they were up against something entirely different. The humans weren't stronger or faster, but they were adaptable, resourceful, and relentless. The Veltrans had never encountered a species that could think and strategize the way humans did. It wasn't just a physical battle anymore, it was a psychological one. A small group of humans, including a survivalist who had lived in the wilderness for years, a former soldier with combat experience, and a skilled tracker, began systematically dismantling the Veltran hunting squad. Each human brought a different skill to the table, and together they formed a team that the Veltrans couldn't counter. The survivalist knew the land like the back of his hand, setting traps in places the Veltrans couldn't anticipate. The soldier used his knowledge of warfare to plan ambushes that caught the Veltrans off guard. The tracker followed the Veltrans' movements without being detected, guiding the others to strike at the perfect moment. The Veltrans found themselves on the defensive, a position they had never experienced before. They had always relied on their overwhelming power to subdue their prey, but here, power wasn't enough. The humans were outthinking them at every turn. It wasn't just that the humans were better at using the environment. It was that they were using their minds in ways the Veltrans couldn't comprehend. They adapted to every challenge the Veltrans threw at them, constantly changing their tactics and staying one step ahead. As the losses mounted, the Veltrans retreated to regroup. They held a council to discuss what had gone wrong. For the first time, they were forced to confront the reality of their situation. The apex predator they had come to Earth to hunt wasn't an animal at all. It was humanity itself. These creatures, who had seemed so unremarkable at first, had proven themselves to be the deadliest species on the planet. The Veltrans had underestimated them, and now they were paying the price. The realization was difficult for the Veltrans to accept. For centuries, they had prided themselves on being the galaxy's ultimate predators. They had never encountered a species that could challenge them in this way. And yet, here on Earth, they had been outclassed by creatures they hadn't even considered worthy of their attention. It was a blow to their pride, but more than that, it was a threat to their very identity as hunters. They had come to Earth expecting an easy victory, but instead, they had found a rival that they couldn't overpower through strength alone. This forced the Veltrans to change their tactics. No longer could they afford to view humans as prey. They had to treat them as competitors, as equals in the hunt. But even then, the Veltrans struggled to understand the full extent of what they were up against. They still believed that with the right strategy, they could outwit the humans and restore their dominance. What they didn't realize was that the humans' capacity for survival went far beyond anything the Veltrans could comprehend. Humans weren't just capable of adapting to their environment, they thrived in it. They had evolved to survive on a planet that was constantly changing, facing challenges that no other species in the galaxy could match. They had learned to use their intelligence and creativity to overcome obstacles, to outthink their enemies rather than simply overpowering them. This was the true strength of humanity, and it was something the Veltrans couldn't replicate. In their arrogance, the Veltrans had underestimated the human capacity for survival. They had assumed that strength and technology would be enough to defeat any opponent, but on Earth, those things meant nothing without the ability to adapt. The humans had mastered the art of survival, and now the Veltrans were experiencing the consequences of that mastery firsthand. It was a humbling experience for a species that had never known defeat, and it left them reeling. The Veltrans' retreat was not a strategic decision, it was born out of necessity. They had lost too many hunters, and their morale was shattered. The humans had proven themselves to be the true apex predators of Earth, not through brute force, but through their intelligence, adaptability, and determination. The Veltrans had no choice but to acknowledge that they had been outmatched. They had come to Earth seeking a trophy, but instead, they had found a lesson in humility. This revelation marked a turning point for the Veltrans. They had to admit, grudgingly, that humans were not the prey they had believed them to be. In fact, they were something far more dangerous. The Veltrans now viewed humanity with a mixture of respect and fear. They no longer saw Earth as a simple hunting ground. Instead, it had become a place of mystery, where the rules of the hunt no longer applied. They understood now that humans were rivals in the truest sense, capable of things the Veltrans could never have anticipated. But even with this newfound respect, the Veltrans made a critical mistake. They still believed that, with enough time and the right tactics, they could defeat humanity. They didn't fully grasp that humans weren't just capable of surviving, they were capable of thriving in the face of overwhelming odds. And that was the Veltrans' greatest miscalculation. For all their strength, they could not overcome the one thing that made humans truly dangerous: their relentless will to survive. The Veltrans, having realized that humanity was far more dangerous than any animal they had previously encountered, retreated to regroup. Their arrogance had taken a hit, but they still believed that their technological superiority and raw power would be enough to crush the humans. They would adapt, just as they had done on countless worlds before. The Veltrans quickly armed themselves with the most advanced weaponry they had at their disposal, designed specifically to target human resistance. They modified their hunting tactics, no longer treating humans as mere prey but as a legitimate threat that needed to be subdued with precision. They studied the human strategies, their use of the environment, and their reliance on guerrilla tactics. The Veltrans were confident that by leveraging their superior technology, they could outmaneuver the humans and force them into a final, decisive confrontation. They deployed drones, scanners, and specialized weapons meant to flush out the humans from their hiding places, believing that sheer force would ultimately prevail. The Veltrans saw this as their moment of redemption, a chance to restore their pride and prove, once and for all, that they were the galaxy's ultimate predators. On the human side, there was no mistaking the gravity of the situation. The survivors, who had witnessed the Veltrans' capabilities firsthand, understood that their enemy was preparing for an all-out assault. They knew that they couldn't match the Veltrans in raw power, but they didn't need to. Humanity had something that the Veltrans didn't fully understand: a deep connection to their planet, an intimate knowledge of the terrain, and an unyielding determination to protect their home. The humans banded together, pooling their skills in survival, combat, and strategy to set a series of elaborate traps for the Veltrans. They had learned from the earlier encounters, this was not just a fight for survival, but for domination. The tension mounted as the Veltrans deployed their forces, convinced that they had finally adapted to the human threat. Their drones swept across the forests, mountains, and plains, searching for any sign of the humans. They believed they had thought of everything, that no human tactic could surprise them now. But they had underestimated the extent to which humans could adapt under pressure. As the Veltrans closed in, confident in their approaching victory, the humans were already one step ahead. The first wave of the Veltran assault met with unexpected resistance. Their drones, designed to detect human heat signatures and movement, were rendered useless as the humans camouflaged themselves with the environment. They used every trick they knew to evade detection, hiding in caves, masking their heat with natural resources, and misleading the drones with false signals. The Veltrans, initially confused, pushed forward, certain that their overwhelming firepower would eventually corner the humans. But they had walked into a trap. The humans had set up their defenses in a way that used the terrain to their advantage. They knew the land better than the Veltrans ever could, and they exploited every hill, valley, and forest. Ambushes were set in narrow passes, where the Veltrans' numbers meant nothing. Explosives and traps were rigged to disorient the hunting squads, causing confusion and fear to spread among their ranks. It was a psychological war as much as a physical one. The Veltrans, who had never experienced such coordinated resistance, began to falter. For every drone they sent out, for every attack they launched, the humans seemed to have a counter. When the Veltrans finally launched their ground assault, thinking they had isolated the humans, they were met with the full force of human ingenuity. The battle quickly turned in favor of the humans. Their guerrilla tactics, environmental mastery, and sheer will to survive overwhelmed the Veltran forces. The Veltrans were shocked to find themselves not just outgunned, but outthought at every turn. No matter how many weapons they deployed or how advanced their technology was, the humans seemed to anticipate their moves. The Veltrans, long accustomed to dominance, were now facing something they had never encountered before, a species that fought not just for survival, but out of loyalty to each other, to their planet, and to their very existence. Humans fought with a fierceness born not of fear, but of determination. They weren't simply defending themselves, they were defending their way of life, their future. This wasn't a simple hunt for dominance, it was a battle for everything the humans held dear. And the Veltrans, for all their strength, had no defense against such willpower. As the battle raged on, the Veltrans began to realize the truth. Their genetic superiority, their physical strength, and their advanced technology meant nothing in the face of human determination. The Veltrans had always relied on their ability to overpower and intimidate their enemies, but here, on Earth, they had met a species that could not be broken. The humans, with their relentless adaptability and resourcefulness, wore the Veltrans down. The Veltrans, who had once considered themselves invincible, were now the ones being hunted, their morale breaking with each passing moment. Defeat was inevitable. The Veltrans, unable to cope with the constant pressure and unyielding resistance of the humans, were forced to retreat. It was a humiliation unlike anything they had ever experienced. For the first time in their long history, they had been outwitted, outfought, and outlasted by a species they had once considered inferior. Their pride, their legacy as the galaxy's apex predators, was shattered. The survivors, beaten and humiliated, fled Earth with the weight of their failure hanging over them. Back on their home world, the Veltrans faced the shame of their defeat. They had come to Earth expecting an easy victory, but instead, they had been taught a painful lesson in humility. The humans, whom they had dismissed as weak and insignificant, had proven to be the most formidable opponents they had ever encountered. The Veltrans' confidence was shattered, their sense of superiority forever shaken. They returned to their society not as victors, but as outcasts, carrying with them the knowledge that they had been bested by a species they had so greatly underestimated. Meanwhile, the humans continued on, largely unaware of the full scale of the threat they had just overcome. They didn't celebrate their victory, there was no need. For them, it had never been about dominance or pride. It had been about survival, about protecting their world and their people. The humans had done what they always did, they adapted, they fought, and they survived. In their minds, they had simply defended their home. They didn't need the galaxy's acknowledgement or approval. They were content in the knowledge that they had stood their ground. But the galaxy had taken notice. The Veltrans' defeat at the hands of humanity sent shockwaves across the stars. The once invincible hunters had been brought low, not by a great beast or an ancient enemy, but by a small, seemingly unremarkable species from a backwater planet. The lesson was clear: humans were not to be underestimated. They weren't just another species to be hunted or conquered. They were the apex predators of their own world, and they had the intelligence, adaptability, and sheer will to survive that made them more dangerous than any creature the Veltrans had ever faced. Strength alone was not enough to claim dominance in the galaxy. The Veltrans had learned that the hard way. Humanity's true power lay not in their physical abilities, but in their capacity to adapt, to outthink their enemies, and to survive against all odds. The Veltrons, once proud and undefeatable, now harbored a grudging respect for the humans they had once mocked. They had learned a valuable lesson: intelligence and resilience were the true marks of a predator. As the Veltrons licked their wounds and retreated into the shadows, the question lingered. Would they seek revenge? Would they one day return, better prepared, more determined? Or had they finally learned that some prey should never be hunted? The galaxy waited, watching, as humanity stood tall, a testament to the strength that comes not from power, but from the unbreakable will to survive.